Good morning, everybody. My name is Matt Harrington. I'm the Executive Director of the Southwestern Vermont Chamber of Commerce. You've been on this channel before. We want to thank Cat TV for hosting us. We're bringing a special broadcast today. Oftentimes, through the last session, the legislative session, the Chamber here in Bennington County has worked with the Vermont Chamber to produce a weekly brief, a weekly newsletter, bullet points, quick to the point. What do you need to know, especially from a business perspective and an economic development perspective? And we called that Monday Matters. And so we figured as we wrap up the session here this year that we would do a live broadcast. Let's get rid of the newsletter and the tight font and the bullets. Let's really go to the source and talk to some of our partners about what has happened in the legislature this past year as we end up the session, and then what do we have to look forward to as we move forward and into the next year. So with me today, very important, we have the Vice President of Government Affairs with the Vermont Chamber of Commerce, Megan Sullivan. Thank you for making the trip down to Bennington this morning, and great to have you.
It is so good to be here. It is my favorite part of the legislative session ending is getting to go and meet with members, meet with our partners, get to see what's happening in the rest of Vermont outside of Montpelier. It helps sort of fuel the work for the session to come, so it's great to be here.
Good. Well, and a beautiful sunny day to have you down here in Bennington, so welcome. Give us a little bit about your background. Tell us your story.
Sure.
How'd you get to here? How'd you get to government affairs,
kind
of in the House and working with the Vermont Chamber?
Well, I am a Vermonter. I'm from Waterbury and worked on a campaign when I was 15 and sort of got that bug, the interest in public policy. And got a job right out of UVM working for the State Economic Development Group, and from there had an opportunity to work in then Congressman Peter Welch's office for about 7 years as his business liaison, which really married my work in economic development and business with my passion for public policy. And then I worked for the state for a little while longer, and then got the request to come and work at the Vermont State Chamber and jumped at it. It's such a great organization, and the work at the State House is really vital for our business community.
Great. Well, thanks for sharing that. We're going to jump into some questions here, and you might even have some additional ones to add, and we can go back and forth. And we have our coffees here, so like a good Monday morning, we're waking you up, we're informing you. As I said before, if you're just joining us, this past year we partnered with the Vermont Chamber and began publishing to our chamber members a weekly newsletter, a legislative update that we called Mondays Matter. The newsletter focused on key business and economic development and community legislation. So it's great to have you here, and we're going to go through some of the high-level stuff. So, Megan, as we wrap up the session, so the session ended a couple weeks ago, and what can you tell us about this recent session? Okay, give us some of the inside baseball. How did it all go down? What are some of the major policies or laws that might be impacting businesses and community?
It was a pretty wild session. I think everyone who has talked about it has said it was different than anything they've seen before. Just a lot of contentious issues, a lot of big issues to deal with. And I think part of that is, we're coming out of the COVID era where there's a lot of federal money at play, and now we're getting back to what is Vermont's budget? How do we live within our budget? Or do we not live within that budget? Do we expand what that looks like so we can do more? And that was really a tension at play, was how do we do that? And so we saw that play out in things like housing development, in property taxes and education spending, and a lot of different areas to say, what are we going to do for the future of Vermont? And, I think some of that's still playing out. Pieces of legislation that were passed that are going to come up again in the veto session next month. So we don't have answers on some of these yet. Yeah,
and we'll kind of take a sidestep here just to kind of give our general viewers a lay of the land. Session usually starts in January.
Yep.
We go to May. A non-pick date in May, whatever we can get through.
Usually about 18 weeks.
Okay.
Is pretty standard.
Okay. And then, like you just mentioned, we kind of close the session, but the governor has a veto session too. Why, and what does that look like?
So the legislature might proactively schedule a session where they're going to come back to look at bills that the governor vetoes, which is what they did this year. So they were ending in May, and they expected the governor was going to likely veto some of the bills that were passed,
Which he did.
which he did. And there's still more that may get vetoed. And they'll come back next Monday, or Monday from this Monday, June 17th and June 18th, to see if the legislative body is going to override those vetoes and have those bills become law, or if they'll sustain any of those vetoes and move with the governor. There's a different bar between what gets, how you override a veto and how you pass a bill. Instead of a majority vote, it's a 2/3 vote.
Okay, so after next week, this all goes down,
Yes.
and then we can officially declare it summer.
We can.
you can
On the
travel around Vermont.
18th, we are going to officially declare that it is summer, which means
gonna
campaigns
say-
start,
I
and
was
we
gonna
just
say
jump right
campaign.
into the next, planning the next session.
Right. So planning of the next session, and to your point, also we've got a lot of local races, big things happening.
Yeah.
We're going to get to that a little bit this show, and obviously we have a national election as well. When you look at the session, a lot of things were going on, and we'll jump into them. But from a business, from a small mom and pop shop on a main street, what's one or two things that they should walk away knowing about this session and heading into the next one?
I think coming into this or leaving this session, especially as they might be engaging with some of the candidates who are running,
Yep.
it's really talking about, what are you doing to help make Vermont an affordable place to do business? Vermont businesses, we know, have done just a tremendous amount through COVID, through some areas that have experienced flooding, to support their community, to support their employees, and are really struggling with some of the higher costs that have come up through inflation, through things that Montpelier really can't control, but need to be talking to representatives and senators about, are the things that you're doing helping our community and making business in our community an affordable thing to do.
Yeah, and I was just having this conversation earlier today, but when I reflect on the 8 years that I've been able to work with our local businesses and our regional businesses, I find that they're considerate. They're moderate. They know that we need more housing. They know that we need childcare. They know that we want to pay people a good wage and make life affordable and enjoyable in Vermont. And so oftentimes I think that perhaps the business community gets a little bit of a black eye, like it's us versus them. And what I have found when I walk around on Main Street is, oftentimes they say, Matt, no, we want to, but within kind of some confines or within kind of some boundaries, right? We just cannot, I think you said it before in the past, we just can't, continue to lob taxes on top of businesses infinitum to bail us out or to pay off or to do expansion.
And on top of that, I think there are some unfunded mandates that we're dealing with. Some, this year they passed a law saying businesses will need to advertise the wage range for any job description, and understand that comes at a cost and ensuring compliance. And it's not that businesses don't want to be transparent, but it's a change. And this was one of those areas where the legislature really worked with us to say, how do we make this something that businesses can absorb? How do we do it over time so they have time to learn about this, to understand what the requirements are? And how do we ensure that if someone's not in compliance, they're not getting hit up with lawsuits for it, but they can work with the state to come into compliance. And I think similarly, we see other issues like that where the legislature is willing to work with the business community to recognize that there is an opportunity to meet halfway. We're going to have, starting July 1st, the governor voluntary paid family medical leave insurance program kicks off. We've been working with a business who's engaged in that, who's talked about the willingness of the Hartford Group to really talk about how do we customize this in a way that's right for your business so that they can do exactly that. Say, this is something we want to do for our employees. We have to do it in the way that works for us. So we're looking forward to hearing the stories about that.
Good. Well, and again, I hear kind of the how do we meet halfway?
Right.
How do we, phase in? I think that always is a kind of a phrasing that comes up that I hear often that we would like. It doesn't always work that way, but really hey, could we have a 1, 2, 3 phase as opposed to shock.
Yeah.
Shock, and that, think of post-COVID, during COVID too, like the shock to the business ecosystem,
Right.
and how do we graduate people up into things, and again, it goes to the saying of businesses want to head in that direction, just how and when. Let's shift a little bit. So we're going to get out of this veto session coming up soon, and then we're going to head into a summer full of campaigning.
Yeah.
Yay! But we do have to mention, we've had some pretty big changes here in Bennington County over the
Right.
last couple weeks, and a major player at the state level. So let's reflect a little bit on Senator Brian Campion deciding not to run this year, and then a few weeks after that, of course, the passing of Senator Dick Sears, and so that's just leaving a massive gap in quite frankly, the Bennington County
Right.
two-seat. The power that we were bringing in. Dick over 30 years, right? Senator Sears over 30 years, really being a powerhouse at the state level, and so that absence, I think, is going to be felt by us. And then we should mention Senator Mazza as
Yeah.
well, passing of Senator Mazza, who again at a state level is just really one of those architects and really embodied a lot of the former kind of Senate.
Right. And I think our hearts go out to Bennington County for the loss of Senator Sears. It is a loss for the whole state of Vermont. Senator Sears brought so much institutional knowledge and understanding to the work that he did, so much integrity to the work that he did, and was always available to listen to his constituents. And I think, Senator Campion stepping down at this point is also hard. He's been a great partner for, again, listening to his constituents. Another chair of education,
Right.
which is just a hugely important committee right now with what we're dealing with
Sure.
in the public education financing system. Senator Kitchell stepping down, who's
Right.
the head of appropriations, the passing of Dick Mazza, who was on the Committee on Committees, which is incredibly influential.
Yeah.
The stepping down of Senator Starr, who's the chair of Department of Agriculture. There's just a lot of change coming, a lot of institutional knowledge that we're losing this upcoming biennium, and so the Senate is going to be a different place.
I was hearing, and I think this is so acute right now, but we also should reflect the last session too, which saw a huge kind
Yeah.
of movement of kind of senators that had made it through COVID.
Right.
And I remember a lot of them had talked about sticking around just to make sure that the appropriated funds were used responsibly, and really kind of that transition of legacy and leadership. But a lot of them stepped down. I was listening to a report, and it was saying something to the tune of, in the last two sessions, there's been a 50% turnover in the Senate,
Yeah.
which is huge.
Huge. And so that's, that turnover are the legislators who knew how the state operated
Right.
under a budget without a lot of federal funding. And so as we're trying to get back to that, how do we live within our means mentality, we're losing some of the folks that know how to do it best. So we're just, really need outreach to our candidates, to our incumbents, to talk about what life on the ground is like right now,
Yeah.
and how do we balance those new programs with living within our costs. And we're going to see that coming up with property taxes. The governor vetoed the bill that had a 14% statewide average property tax increase, but the Joint Fiscal Office just came out with a fiscal note that said the non-homestead rate, if that veto is sustained, and nothing is done on cost containment, would be a 30% increase. So those are our businesses, those are our renters. I think the message of saying 30% isn't acceptable, 14% isn't acceptable. We have to do something now about cost containment, is important.
Yeah. Well, as my father once said, it's an interesting and exciting race.
Yeah.
And all we have to do is vote, right? So all our constituents, make sure you get out and vote. And as we're talking here with Megan Sullivan, Vice President of Government Affairs at Vermont Chamber, I think you're providing some great information.
Yeah.
For some
Thank you.
consideration. So again, all you have to do is vote, but the vote is big, and I would heed some of Megan's advice.
And I would say engage as well.
Engage.
On one issue, data privacy, there have been real leaders in Bennington County in the business community that have come out and really talked about how to move forward on a balanced way on that bill. That's not what we saw get passed, and they're continuing to stay engaged with the governor's office, with legislators, to say, what is passed is going to really impact the business community.
Yeah.
How do we move forward in a balanced way? And Bennington County businesses are really doing a great job of bringing that message to Montpelier.
So let's take that data privacy.
Yeah.
Break it down for us. As Michael Scott says, tell me like I'm a sixth grader. Okay, so I'm trying to follow some of this, and I get lost, I think, a little bit in it. But Megan, talk to us. Just say, what does it basically state, and where has, I guess, Bennington County really, as you've mentioned, come out to help?
So what we've seen is a failure for the federal government to act. So data privacy is something that should be done on the federal level because our data doesn't live within the boundaries of Vermont. It's something that happens as businesses are doing digital marketing across state lines. But the federal government hasn't acted. So states have started more and more to take this on themselves. And we've seen sort of two tracks. One track are states going really industry forward. And one is approaching this as how do we first protect consumer rights, second, ensure that businesses are able to successfully come along with this, and then third, hold bad actors accountable. That's the model that Connecticut has passed, that Maine and New Hampshire have passed, and what we've said is let's stick with what's going on regionally. Do something that's good for consumers, that's good for businesses, that helps businesses comply. But instead, what we've seen is some national groups who have come in and really pushing an agenda for an extreme bill that is, from what these businesses have said, is really going to be challenging. The cost of compliance is going to be hard. And the inclusion of a private right of action, they've shown, has led to a lot of frivolous lawsuits or shakedown letters that say, we could go to court, and we're going to put you through months of discovery, and it's going to cost you $100,000 for you to show that you didn't violate this law, or you can give us $10,000 and we'll go away. So we see these letters come in from what's going on in other states, and it's creating a lot of challenges. And you've got businesses in Bennington County who have a real expertise in e-commerce, Orvis, Vermont Country Store, local businesses that employ a lot of people, who are just talking about their lived experience with this, and it really is helping to inform the Vermonter perspective on this issue. Yeah.
Does that where does that end as the session closes, and does it go into the next session?
So that bill passed with some of these more extreme measures that make us an outlier from what's going on regionally, what's going on nationally, with this private right of action. So we are asking the governor to veto this bill and for the legislature to come back next session and work with us to find a more balanced path forward.
Okay. All right. So let's shift again. Maybe some bright spots. We need a little bit. Monday can get a little bit grueling. So any bright spots that you're seeing in the summer, other than I think you get to travel around and get to see all the friendly people. But other bright spots, I guess, from your bird's eye view of the state of government affairs, of what are you excited about?
I think it's hard to have this much turnover, but we have to look at it as an opportunity to have really good, engaging conversations with folks. So I think whether it's me traveling around the state or businesses in the county who have the opportunity to invite legislators in or have a cup of coffee, meet with you, and talk about what are those issues that are impacting the business community. What can we do about housing? What can we do about our workforce shortage? Have some really good conversations. This summer is going to be a really good time going into the next biennium to do that, and hopefully we can get some good ideas flowing.
Okay, so stay in that theme, because I know you are often out and about. When you're traveling around the state, listening to other businesses, what are they saying? What are they talking about? And one of the conversations that you and I have had off and on is, this retail theft and safety. And, what's interesting is down here in Bennington County, although, I think, we've gotten a good group together that we've talked about it, but it doesn't, it's just a different, you kind of hear the nuances in Bennington County versus you've talked about Chittenden County. And so, I'm fascinated, and maybe some of our audiences as well, kind of, what are you hearing maybe that's in parallel to what you're hearing in Bennington County, or maybe maybe there's a little bit different, and it's good for all of us to know too.
Yeah, I think, there are different pieces on when it's, the retail theft issue is a good example. Housing is another good example of places where they're saying we just don't have enough homes, and some areas are saying we have a lot of homes, but they need a lot of work to be able to be livable. So it's a matter of how do we revamp the housing stock that we have versus how do we build new, and is there opportunities for both? We hear a lot everywhere about workforce challenges, not being able to find the workers that you need, and that can change whether you're a border town like Bennington, or if you're in the middle of the state. And certainly some of our counties that see an outflux of people, not just to bordering states, but to places like Chittenden County, it can be a real challenge. So we know that those demographic challenges are statewide.
Okay.
There's a lot of shared camaraderie, I would say, between businesses around the state, always with a special nuance for wherever you are, though.
Sure. Okay, so we had mentioned getting out to vote, and you had added the disclaimer and get engaged,
Yeah.
which I think is important. If businesses want to learn more about these types of issues or how to get involved, what can they do?
Certainly engage with your legislator. I think, this power of partnership is huge. So if you're a subscriber to Monday Matters, you're hearing from not only Matt, but you're hearing from me about what's going on in the state. But always feel free to reach out to Matt, and he can connect you with me, or reach out to me directly. The thing about living in a small state is it's accessible. You can always find an opportunity to talk to somebody. So if you want to engage, we're always happy to talk to anyone in the business community or just in the community in general.
Yeah, and I'll put a plug in for the local chamber, the Southwestern Vermont Chamber. We have a mixer coming up this Wednesday. Maybe not always the time you want to corner people and talk about politics, but maybe over a cocktail. So we'll have that at Little City Cider, very familiar to those here in Bennington and throughout the region. Little City Cider is our mixer this week, and then we have our big B2B golf tournament, and that's June 26th up at the Equinox Golf Resort. So again, over 100 players, great time to get out on the course, enjoy sunny, beautiful summer in Vermont, while also, I have to imagine some of those conversations are going to revolve around some business topics and some of the politics that are happening. So again, you can go to our website, swvtchamber.com, and your website being
vtchamber.com.
Very easy. We'll put it up there, but also, if you need additional information, reach out to me. Last kind of question, Megan. Anything that we didn't cover that you still want to say, hey, this is important.
I think on the housing front, there was a pretty substantial Act 250 bill that was passed this year, something that has been in the works for years, trying to get something passed. A really historic agreement between development groups and conservation groups about how do we find a path forward that both encourages development in smart growth areas as well as protect our natural environment. And I think there's going to be opportunities in that for planning and engagement, as well as interim exemptions to really push housing forward. That bill, we don't know the fate of yet, but I think Seth Bongartz from the county worked very hard on that. The Vermont Chamber worked hard on that, and hoping that comes to fruition.
Great. Well, Megan, thank you for joining us here
Thank you for having me.
On a digital, in-person Monday Matters. Megan Sullivan, the Vice President of Government Affairs with the Vermont Chamber of Commerce, joining us this Monday. I'm Matt Harrington. I'm with the Southwestern Vermont Chamber. You have watched a Monday Matters. Go over to our website, subscribe if you want, and you'll get updates from Megan and the group there. And we've been having a great partnership, so we're excited to kick off the next session, making sure all of you feel informed, that you're communicated with, and if you have any questions, as Megan or I have said today, please reach out. So again, thank you.
Thanks for having me.